What an honor for my guest, whom I hardly know, except through this extraordinary documentary that he produced, and have been given the rare privilege of talking with an accomplished director, producer, and so on. So what I thought I should do is begin this short interview. We only have 30 minutes to us. Let me ask my guest to introduce himself and tell the whole world to know what the world knows about him already, but just
Uh,
make sure that there may be those who might not.
Thank you, Teodros. I appreciate the opportunity, and I'm Andrew Buckley. I am the creator and host of the public media series Hit and Run History. Our latest documentary, Stephano: The True Story of Shakespeare Shipwreck, is what have been watching, and let's see, I've been twice nominated for an Emmy. Uh, I am a commercial fisherman as well. And I live primarily in Chatham, down on Cape Cod, right on the elbow, with my daughter and two dogs, a cat and a rabbit, which is a new one. And I have been working on this series, Hit and Run History, for almost 13 years now. Yeah. So, but this is our pride and joy that we've put together here in the for 90 minutes, and very happy with the reception that it's received.
Incredible.
So,
Of course, and I intuitively feel that you're a very hardworking man. And of course, you've been reading The Tempest, the famous Shakespeare Saga, very carefully. Um, how did you manage to integrate your extensive knowledge of the Tempest and this remarkable documentary that you have produced? How did you manage to coordinate them? Because
well,
they. Mhm.
it's funny because uh, I grew up on Cape Cod. My mother, who's still very much alive, Lucy Jane Buckley, born Lucy Jane Hopkins, um, grew up on Hopkins Lane in East Orleans, and so it was just kind of common knowledge as I was growing up that um, not only had we descended from somebody who had come over on the Mayflower, but he had a very different story from the religious group that came over, and it was the fact that he had been to Jamestown 10 years beforehand, before the Mayflower had arrived. He'd been in North America, 10 years before Plymouth and the whole Thanksgiving thing and all the rest, and but that he had also, on his way to Virginia, wrecked in Bermuda, and been shipwrecked there, got into trouble there. Um, and that's kind of, that was on the periphery of my mind as I was just a little kid. And then later on, when I was in high school, of course, reading Shakespeare and all the rest, but I did some reading into his background. I think I did a book report on a biography of his, and so I was able to get a little bit more information about it. And then in college, it got a little bit more in depth, especially. But it was really the fact that it was accepted in my family that there was some sort of connection between Shakespeare's final play, The Tempest, which involves a shipwreck, and Stephen Hopkins, who was shipwrecked on Bermuda in 1609. And so, it's just one of those things you take for granted and you don't look into it too much. Of course, I remember, watching any number of movies, performances of The Tempest, and it was, and I didn't really, I wasn't connecting the dots too much, but as things approached the 400th anniversary of the Mayflower, and especially the 400th anniversary of Shakespeare's death. There was a lot of 400 anniversaries going on. The 400th anniversary of Pocahontas' death and coming to England and all the rest. And so it started to really set in. There was a performance, or actually, should I say, the film of the Stratford Shakespeare Festival in Canada. I believe it's near Toronto or somewhere near Ottawa. And that was put on, it was at the Wellfleet Harbor Actors Theatre. And so I remember going to watch that, but I was going with the idea that maybe I might actually make a film about my ancestor. Mm-hmm. So I looked at this, and that's when it really kind of sunk in, along with the fact that I was taking a cruise ship from Boston to Bermuda. And as I was telling someone I knew at the Massachusetts Foundation for the Humanities that I was going to be going, and they said, well, what's historical there? Because they always knew that I was going around and chasing stories all over. And I said, no, this is just a vacation. But maybe I'll, go look into my ancestor who was shipwrecked there. And, the light bulbs started going off, and they said, wait a minute, what do you mean? It's like, well, yeah, he was shipwrecked there. He later came back on the Mayflower, may have been the basis of Stephano and the Tempest. And they said, when you come back, you should write a grant proposal for that. And I did. And the Massachusetts Foundation for the Humanities awarded us a $10,000 pre-production grant based upon it. But, it's the story. It's simply using Stephen Hopkins as a vehicle to be able to tell about that period of very early transatlantic exchange. Not only is Stephen Hopkins going from England to Bermuda and Jamestown, but just about the same time, Squanto is going involuntarily to Spain and England. And so, there's a lot of back and forth there. And I think a lot of Americans think about history this way. 1492, 1620, 1776, Civil War, World War I, World War II. And we're done. And they don't think about anything that was happening between 1492 especially and 1620. And so that started the story just became richer and richer as we pulled apart, chased down little different leads. We often say that our style is almost like a procedural. You're going through and you talk to this historian, and you go here, and then you go the beach where the shipwreck happened. Well, let's read from a firsthand account of the shipwreck. Just layering on all these things, and it really, it's almost like phyllo dough. It's got many, many layers to it, one on top of another, and we saw so many different performances again of the Tempest, so many interpretations, and it really helped us get into the story, the history, a lot better, I think. So with so many different facets to it. I'm sorry, that's a very long-winded answer to your question.
No, it's an excellent response. I wouldn't have wanted it in any other way. And that's exactly what I was looking for, and you did it. Now, as you know, I'm an academic, a professional philosopher, but also a novelist, a writer, who is always creating characters. So I couldn't help but say to myself, why didn't Shakespeare mention the Mayflower in the Tempest?
Well, actually, I think, he would have, I believe he died prior to the Mayflower, but the sea venture,
yes.
That really is the crux of it. And a number of people have said, before they watched the film, they're saying, is it possible that Stephen Hopkins came back to England and told his story to did Shakespeare get that story directly from Stephen Hopkins? And I love the idea of my ancestor sitting in the Dolphin, tavern in London and
Yes,
sharing a pint with the bard.
Shakespeare. That's right.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
he didn't get back until well after the first performance of the Tempest. So the story got back to England before he did. So you can imagine if you're coming back to England a couple of years after Shakespeare's final play, big hit, especially with King James. He comes back, you got to wonder how people were looking at him if he was the basis of this drunken clown. How would you like to return after 7 years of the indenture and everybody's looking at you like, oh, you're the
Yeah.
big mouth troublemaker. and so it's really interesting. In fact, in one of the most recent PBS versions of the Mayflower, I can't, Saints and Strangers, I think it was. They introduced Stephen Hopkins in this historical, fictional narrative, so to speak. They introduce him, and somebody says, "Oh, Stephen Hopkins, he's a notorious hothead." and that's the thing, is that I think people knew that my ancestor was possibly going to be trouble, and it may have been based upon the history, and it may have been based upon the fact that he was immortalized by Shakespeare.
Mm-hmm.
That's a heck of a reputation to have to precede you.
Indeed. And now, what kind of projects have you done prior to this spectacular one?
We started off with following the story of the first American voyage around the world, the Columbia expedition, which left Boston in September 30th, 1787. So we're talking about a voyage around the world before the Constitution had even been ratified. And we followed that. We're looking to follow that story in the same fashion as this one, but do it in multi-episodes, because it took years for them to go around the world. So we did a pilot, which was really only supposed to be a book trailer. I was trying to sell a historical travelogue idea as a book. And so we're using YouTube in that regard. However, we got a little too successful. We received some grants from other cultural councils, and we got enough money together to go to Cape Verde, which was their first stop. So we went there, and right before we were about to go, we went to Cape Verde, and the World Health Organization declared a dengue fever epidemic. We ended up bringing an aid worker with us, along with some relief supplies, to one of the hospitals where people were being treated for dengue fever. So in that particular case, we filmed that. And so we became part of the story, and that became part of our approach, is that it's the story of us following the story around the world. Then we went to the Falkland Islands, which was their next stop. We took a cruise around Cape Horn. They went around Cape Horn. We went up to the Pacific Northwest, and that's about where we had to stop, because the next locations they went were Hawaii, China, and Japan. Not cheap places to bring a 5-person film crew. So right as we were about to think about how to be able to raise the money for that, this project reared its head, and we said, well, we've got to get this done in time for the 400th anniversary of the Mayflower. So we've done that. And then also for WGBH, a producer from their website asked us to see if we could take one of our episodes and put it on their website. And I said, no, I don't want to cut up my work, but I will produce 10 5 to 7 minute biographies of people behind the story of the Columbia expedition. And we did that, and we were very happy with the result, because we basically could take 10 characters and flesh them out in any number of different styles that we wanted to. And the great thing is that people were going on the site and binge watching it, to the point of which they were spending 40 minutes on the GBH website. Whereas if they went to, I won't name names of shows, I'll just say that they're nationally known and recognized, they would spend 2 to 4 minutes. So we were we were by far doing very well with getting people's attention on these short bios and doing them in such a way that we could still be generating content. And that was the thing, is we wanted to be able to experiment with form, and we found a way to do it. We were also finding that educators, high school history teachers, were coming to some of our screenings and saying, I've got a classroom full of 15 and 16-year-old boys, and they're not getting into anything here, but they'll watch this. They'll watch you guys. And so that was very gratifying to hear, because we've as far as our approach is concerned, we've always said, we're not trying to be the last word on a topic, but rather the first word. If you're going to be introduced to a topic in history, especially a lesser known one that integrates a lot of different information and tells it in a fast-paced style, then we're doing our job if we can get those young minds interested in history.
And now let's go to think about finances, not a favorite topic, but important. How did you manage to fund the project?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would say it was absolutely instrumental that we got that grant from Mass Humanities, yes, a pre-production grant, because what that allowed us to do is it was to pay for a fundraising trailer, just to pay for the production of a trailer, so that we could then raise more money. So turn that money and multiply it. And we also had to have matching funds for that. And so, there was money from screenings. We did crowdsourcing as well, and that helped out a great deal. But the thing is that when we went to go make this fundraising trailer, which was about 7 minutes long, and really it was meant to pitch to people what we were trying to do. Well, we went to Plymouth Plantation. We went down to Jamestown. There's footage in the film that is actually taken from that fundraising trailer. Mm-hmm. Interviewed a number of people. I could probably have made a film, not this one, but I could have made enough of a film with just that money alone. However, once we did that, we were able to raise more money, get partnerships, and then the post-production afterwards, the editing, the sound engineering and such, two ways. One, we made this film in partnership with Rhode Island PBS, but also as a production of the Cape Media Center down on Cape Cod. And that is the local access stations for Chatham, Harwich, Dennis, Yarmouth, and Brewster. And by combining their resources, they have a very professional studio that they put together. And so a number of the people who work there are on my crew as well. So the thing is, we were able to cut costs by using in-house resources. So there was that. And then on top of that, we received a grant from Cape and Island Airlines for the post-production as well. So every little bit, we were able to get just a little bit further by a little bit more money. And then we could count on things like, well, what we're doing here tonight, thanks to the Cultural Council giving us a grant here. We received grants from other towns as well. And as long as we knew we were going to be awarded those grants by doing an event like this, we could pay our bills. So therefore, we could borrow against things, knowing that we were going to get those small grants. In a way, we could bank that and be able to put our neck out. And it has certainly paid off very well for us, because we have screened this on New Hampshire PBS now, as well as Rhode Island PBS, as well as WETA in Washington, D.C., as well as WCTE, which is a public television station down in Tennessee, and there are more coming along as well. And so every time we do that, we try to find a local underwriter to cover the broadcast fee, and that helps us pay our bills. And so it's but we as a production of the Cape Media Center, we are a nonprofit. So we just got to cover our costs. But the thing is, if we take contributions in, it's a 501c3 nonprofit, so it's a charitable donation. Okay,
well, we're coming very close to the end. I think we have about 10 minutes or so left. So let me now move to questions of technique.
Yeah.
I watched the documentary very carefully. It is, technically speaking, very proficient. What I want to know is what is the kind of knack that you have that made this documentary most particularly appealing to 15-year-olds whose attention span is notoriously short, as you know. I hope I'm not going to be critiqued for this.
This is not a news flash. I think we all know the attention spans of teenagers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, and that's what we've gone for. In fact, when I first, like I said, when I first started off, um, trying to make just a series of book trailers, which was going to be just a few interviews about the Columbia expedition. I was just trying to convince agents and editors that this story existed because they didn't know about it. How was I going to use it? I was going to use YouTube. Well, you go onto YouTube, especially when they were first getting started, and there was all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
And so we realized that if we paid attention to that, and what was appealing to them, because we realized that was the competition. It wasn't Discovery Channel. It wasn't National Geographic. It was, Cute Kitty Can't Turn Over videos that people will play over and over and over again that are just brain candy. And so the first thing is I went up to the Apple store on Boylston Street in Boston. They were giving free multi-week classes in the evenings on how to use Final Cut, their video editing platform. And so they said, and one of the first things they had us do, sitting around this big table, seems like a million years ago, people sitting around a table in a public space taking a class. And so they said, here, take this piece of music, and here are some video clips of someone just riding a motorcycle along. And they said, edit the clips, cut them to the beat of the music. And so and all of a sudden, it goes from just a mishmash. You set it to music, and all of a sudden, the music really, you can feel it. And I'm a big lover of soundtracks. Anyway, so you'll notice in the film that almost, I'd say 99% of the film, there is music in the background. And that is because I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to set the mood and how to set the pacing just right. And usually we use modern music as much as we can and not period music. So we were able to do that, but also it has to be important that it moves. And so I often said to people, to my crew, I do not want to, if at all possible, have a picture, have a shot of a very old white-haired historian sitting in front of a bunch of books. We have to move. We have to walk. If we're going to do an interview, we're going to be moving around in some place, because that physical movement shows some sort of progression. Much more, you'll be engaged in it because something is moving along the screen. You've got music in the background. It seems to be flowing forward. And we're talking about history. You have a built-in sense of that it has to be staid and dry and a recitation of facts. And instead, we're having a conversation. And so oftentimes, the crew will participate in a conversation. So if I was interviewing you, for example, it'd be you and me talking, and then the other 3 or 4 people in the room. And if they have something more to say, they'll interject it. And then it becomes a conversation. And a conversation that you're now watching as a viewer with the music going on in the background. That's why sometimes some of our best shots are in bars. It just seems like, I'm just telling you a story about, this guy who got into trouble, and I just happen to be related to him, and Shakespeare wrote a play about him. That's an interesting story you might want to eavesdrop on in a bar or wherever, a pizza parlor or wherever. So that's the sort of style that we go to, rapid cutting, and to be able to just grab people's attention just enough so that then maybe they'll turn around, especially a young person, mention it to their teacher the next day, go to the library, look it up online, find something, look into it more. If I've done that, I've done my job.
So my last two questions are going to be on the following. What are some of the difficulties that you encountered, both technically and otherwise, in the production of this film?
I would say, I mean, first of all, there's the physical challenge of going to England and going to Bermuda and such. When we were in Bermuda, our interviews, anytime anybody films anything in Bermuda, they have to use local talent. And so we hired Jason Lowe, who was a videographer, to join the crew. And so, and he was great. He brought his own equipment as well, and gave us some local knowledge as to what the islands were like, because I live on Cape Cod, and I grew up there, and I know if you don't have somebody local to show you around, you miss 90% of what you really want in the atmosphere. And so that went really well. So that was something that was difficult at first, but we overcame it because we found the right person to help us out. The other thing, of course, is that we would go to places, and oftentimes in England, we would be told that it wouldn't be possible to go in to do something. Oh, it's going to be closed. Oh, no, we can't have a big camera crew coming show up. Of course, we're not a big camera crew. But of course, when Chris Wessling is able to get in and see the building in London where Squanto had lived, it was certainly worth the persistence. And that's really how it is we're very intrepid, and we try to find our ways to get into things. And so that was certainly worth it. But there were times that we couldn't film things at the American Shakespeare Center. We wanted to film a performance of the Tempest because we hadn't gotten anyone yet directly to film it ourselves. And unfortunately, at the last moment, we show up at the American Shakespeare Center, and they said, "Oh, one member of the cast is with Actors Equity, and it's going to cost $7,000 for you to film any part of the play." Well, I didn't have $7,000 on my credit card available at the time, and so we just had to go watch.
Amazing.
And so but we found another performance instead. So, and it worked out because we ended up interviewing Bernard Cornwell, which was a boon at the last minute. We never anticipated, and that worked out really well. So there's always something. We always can overcome something with enough persistence and ingenuity.
Mm-hmm. And finally, any surprises, Sandro, in the process of producing the film?
I think it was really when I was doing my research. And it was when I was realizing, I put together a timeline to see where everyone was. Where was Stephen Hopkins, and put that into a spreadsheet. And then where was Squanto at a particular time? Where was John Smith? Where was Pocahontas? And I started to realize when I sorted it by date that Stephen Hopkins and Squanto and Pocahontas were all in London at the same time, even when she died. Mm-hmm. So the question is, did Stephen Hopkins meet Squanto in London in 1618 or whatever, prior to their meeting again in Plymouth, or their meeting in Plymouth in 1621? So you can just imagine if Squanto walks into Plymouth in the spring of 1621, is it possible that Stephen Hopkins said, "Hey, I know you, I've met you before," and Squanto saying the same thing? And if they didn't know each other directly, they would have had one degree of separation. They would have known the same people in London. And that was really gratifying to know that there were things going on before the Mayflower even arrived. And it's just happenstance that they end up in the same place, because the Mayflower was blown off course. Squanto had just recently arrived back in there. And if those two things hadn't happened at the same time, it's very possible the colony would have failed.
And of course, final question. You're very happy with the reception, correct?
Very, very happy, very gratified. And all it is I'm working my way across the country right now, talking with program directors from different PBS stations, and very interested. So we're looking at next spring, for the anniversary of Shakespeare's birth, which happens in April, I believe. I'll be showing the film in different places all over the country. In fact, I'm headed to California right now. I'm in Las Vegas right now, but I'm headed to California tomorrow and we're looking to announce some broadcast dates for that.
Wonderful.
So
It has been my privilege and my honor to have participated in this event of knowing you and conversing with you and interviewing with you. And of course, I wish you the best of the best. Thanks for the honor.
Thank you. Thank you. It was my pleasure. I appreciate the opportunity. And certainly I appreciate all the technical work that's going into this broadcast as well, and the grant we received from the Cultural Council. So thanks to them. So I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.